That price you see at the gas pump? Next week, it's going to tell you a story about the US dollar. Not because OPEC is meeting, but because a 50-year-old secret deal that made America rich just died in silence. If I'm wrong, close this video. But if I'm right, what I'm about to show you will make you look at every price tag, every bill, and every dollar in your wallet completely differently. Starting tonight, for 50 years, that secret deal, a hidden contract, underpinned the entire global economy. It dictated that every single barrel of oil sold anywhere on the planet had to be bought and paid for with US dollars. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a carefully engineered system. Every country on Earth, friend or foe, needed a constant supply of our currency to purchase the energy that fueled their societies. This created a permanent, artificial demand for the dollar. And the end of that deal is why the value of every dollar you've ever worked for is on the verge of being systematically erased. The cost of filling up your car, the price of your groceries, the very dream of owning a home, all of it is tied to this single, monumental event. This system allowed the United States to become the most powerful nation in history, even as we produced less and owed more than anyone else. That system, the petrodollar system, has just ended. But you won't see this on the nightly news. The media isn't telling you. Your politicians in Washington are not warning you. Because if you truly understood what was happening, if you understood that the very foundation of American prosperity just cracked, you would realize that the America you grew up in, the one you were promised, is already gone. To understand how we got here, you need to understand a secret. This story doesn't start today. It begins on a summer night, August 15th, 1971. On that evening, President Richard Nixon appeared on television and announced to the world that he was temporarily closing the gold window. It was a sanitized phrase for a seismic event. In plain English, he declared that the US dollar would no longer be redeemable for physical gold. For the first time in modern history, the world's most important currency was officially backed by nothing tangible. It was just paper. A piece of paper backed only by a promise from the United States government. And promises, as we all know, can be broken. The Nixon administration knew this created an existential problem. If the dollar was just an IOU with nothing behind it, why on earth would the rest of the world accept it? Why would foreign nations hold trillions of these paper promises in their central bank reserves? Why would global commerce continue to run on a currency that was now officially backed by nothing but faith? The answer came 3 years later, in 1974. A plan was devised by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, a plan that would reshape the next 50 years of world history. He flew to Saudi Arabia and brokered a deal. A simple deal, a brilliant deal, an evil deal. Here is what was agreed upon in secret. The United States would provide unwavering military protection to the Saudi royal family. We would sell them our most advanced weapons, share our intelligence, and guarantee their regime's security against any and all regional threats. In exchange, Saudi Arabia, as the undisputed leader of OPEC and the world's largest oil exporter, would do one thing for us. They would agree to sell all of their oil to every single customer around the globe, exclusively in US dollars. Not in gold, not in pounds or yen or any other currency, only dollars. Through their dominance of OPEC, this rule became the global standard. From Venezuela to the UAE, from Nigeria to Indonesia, the world was given no choice. Oil for dollars. Dollars for oil. Do you see the stroke of genius in it? The dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was now backed by something the modern world needed even more. Black gold. Oil. This system was the ultimate economic cheat code. We could print trillions of dollars out of thin air, exchange these pieces of paper for the world's most valuable resources in manufactured goods, and export our inflation for everyone else to absorb. We could run trillion-dollar deficits year after year without immediate consequence. We funded an empire on borrowed time and borrowed money. But every deal built on power instead of value has an expiration date, and we just hit it. In 2023, while the world was distracted, Saudi Arabia quietly confirmed that the 50-year-old security agreement with the United States would not be renewed. The deal is off. The foundation of our entire economic system just cracked, and the people in charge met it with a deafening silence. It wasn't a headline on CNN. There was no emergency address from the White House. Most Americans still have no idea it even happened. This is a piece of hidden history that will define your future. So let me ask you, before watching this video, had you ever even heard of the Petrodollar agreement? Just comment yes or no down below. I'm genuinely curious to know. So, a 50-year-old secret deal has ended. But you don't have to take my word for it that the world is changing. Look at the numbers. Look at the actions, not the words. In the year 2000, roughly 73% of all global foreign exchange reserves, the money held by central banks around the world, was held in US dollars. The dollar was, without question, the king. By 2020, that number had already dropped to 59%. Today, it's under 55% and falling faster than ever. In the slow-moving world of global finance, this isn't just a trend, it's a freefall. It is a statistical fire alarm, and the world's central bankers are all rushing for the exits at once. This is a deliberate, coordinated flight from the dollar. After the US imposed sanctions in 2014, Russia dumped nearly all of its dollar reserves and began stockpiling physical gold like their future depended on it. Since 2021, China has reduced its holdings of US Treasury bonds by over $300 billion. They are systematically weaning themselves off of our currency. India is now conducting its massive energy trade with other nations in its own currency, the rupee. Brazil and Argentina are settling trade in their local currencies. Even supposed allies like France are publicly calling to reduce their dependence on the dollar. And now, the final nail in the coffin. The trend is accelerating at a terrifying pace. At the recent BRICS summit, the economic alliance specifically designed to challenge the dollar, they officially invited Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran to become full members. Let me repeat that. The very architects of the petrodollar system, the oil giants who once guaranteed the dollar's dominance, are now publicly joining the club that is building its replacement. This is no longer a future prediction. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is happening right now, and it is the single greatest economic shift of our lifetime. So, why should you care about what foreign central banks are doing? Why does any of this matter to your daily life? Because this isn't about geopolitics. This is about the price of a loaf of bread next year. It's about your ability to afford gasoline, to pay your rent, to save for a future that feels increasingly uncertain. For 50 years, the world's need for dollars to buy oil meant they had to absorb the trillions of new dollars we printed. We exported our inflation, and they held the bag. Now that bag is being handed back to us. When the world no longer needs or wants those dollars, all those trillions we printed to fund our wars, and our deficits don't just disappear. They start coming home. Trillions of dollars, flooding back into the United States, all chasing the same amount of goods and services. That is the textbook definition of inflation. But it won't be the 6% or 8% you've been dealing with. It will be the kind of inflation that wipes out the savings of the middle class in a matter of months. Let me give you a visual. Imagine your life savings are a bucket of water. For 50 years, the US has been printing money, which is like a giant fire hose constantly pouring more water into your bucket. But because the rest of the world needed dollars, they were there with their own buckets, catching all the overflow. They were absorbing our inflation for us. Now they've walked away. The fire hose is still on full blast, but nobody is catching the overflow anymore. Your bucket is flooding, but it's even worse than that. The loss of the dollar's global status is like a giant leak has been punched in the bottom of your bucket. The water inside, your purchasing power, the value of your money, isn't just being diluted. It's actively draining away. It's evaporating, and here is the most terrifying part. The government cannot stop it. The people in power, the ones at the Federal Reserve who talk about controlling inflation, are utterly powerless against this. Their tools don't work when the problem isn't the business cycle. It's the loss of the world's reserve currency. They are trapped. If they raise interest rates high enough to try and save the dollar, it will crash the stock market, the housing market, and make the interest payments on our $36 trillion national debt completely unsustainable. The entire economy would implode. But if they pivot and print more money to try and paper over the problems, they will only accelerate the inflation and drive even more countries to abandon the dollar. There is no good option. There is no easy way out. In the game of chess, this is called checkmate, and the people in power know it. That's why they are so silent. When the game is over, the only thing left to do is pretend it's still being played. But while they are pretending, the smartest money on the planet is already moving. When the richest, most informed people and institutions on Earth change their behavior, you need to pay attention. Billionaires are buying farmland. Bill Gates is now the largest private owner of farmland in America, not because he wants to be a farmer. It's because he understands that in a currency crisis, the people who own the means of producing food hold real power. Land is a hard asset. It has value regardless of what happens to paper money. Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, has been screaming about the dollar's decline for years. He has reallocated significant portions of his funds into gold and foreign assets. Even Warren Buffett, who historically has been a bull on America, has been diversifying Berkshire Hathaway's holdings into Japanese and other foreign stocks. And then there are the central banks themselves. The very institutions that are supposed to manage the global currency system are buying physical gold at the fastest pace in recorded history. China, Russia, India, Turkey, Poland. All of them are loading up on gold bars and reducing their dollar reserves. In 2023 alone, they purchased over 1,000 tons of it. Why? Because they know the dollar's reign is ending. They are building a lifeboat before the ship sinks. They are looking for a safe harbor in the coming storm. Meanwhile, your financial advisor probably still tells you to keep 100% of your retirement in dollar-denominated stocks and bonds. They're either ignorant of what's happening or they're lying. Either way, you're the one who stands to lose everything. The end of the petrodollar system isn't the final event. It is the first domino to fall in a long and terrifying chain reaction. What comes next is not a slow, gentle decline. It is a cascade, a systemic failure that unfolds in a predictable sequence. Here is the roadmap to ruin. First, oil-producing nations start accepting other currencies for their oil. This is already happening. China is paying for Saudi oil in its own currency, the yuan. India is using rupees. Russia is demanding rubles. Each one of these non-dollar transactions is another crack in the dam, reducing the world's need to hold dollars. Second, countries holding trillions of our dollars in their reserves start to sell. They see the writing on the wall, and nobody wants to be the last one holding the bag when the music stops. Russia has already done this. China is doing it slowly, strategically. But as the momentum builds, the selling will turn from a trickle into a flood. When they dump our treasury bonds, the price of those bonds plummets, and interest rates in America will be forced to spike dramatically. Third, those spiking interest rates make our government's debt impossible to manage. The United States is already drowning in over $36 trillion of national debt. The interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion per year. If interest rates are forced to double or triple, the interest payments will consume the entire federal budget. The country will be, for all practical purposes, insolvent. Fourth, faced with insolvency, the government will be left with only one tool: the printing press. The Federal Reserve will be forced to print money on a scale you cannot even imagine, just to pay the interest on the debt. This is the point of no return. Fifth, this massive, desperate act of money printing triggers hyperinflation. The last shreds of confidence in the dollar evaporate, both at home and abroad. People will rush to get out of dollars and into anything else: foreign currencies, gold, crypto, land, anything that holds value. This is the currency death spiral. And it leads to a banking crisis, which triggers a debt crisis, which triggers a societal crisis. This isn't a new story. This is one of the oldest stories in history. Just ask the Romans, who watched their silver denarius get debased into worthlessness. Ask the Spanish Empire, which collapsed under a mountain of debt. Ask the British, who went from ruling the world to being unable to afford their empire in the span of a few decades after World War II. Every single global reserve currency in history has ended, and they all end the exact same way: military overextension, endless wars, unsustainable debt, and finally, the debasement of the currency to try and pay for it all. We are following that script to the letter. But there is one terrifying difference this time. In the past, when one empire's currency fell, another was ready to take its place. The pound sterling replaced the Dutch guilder. The US dollar replaced the pound. The transition, while sometimes rocky, had a clear path forward. This time, there is no clear successor. We are staring into a global power vacuum. We are standing at a fork in the road of money, with three chaotic paths ahead. The first scenario is a multipolar currency world. This is a world of financial chaos, where different blocks of countries operate on different currency systems. The US and its allies use the dollar, Europe uses the euro, and the BRICS nations use the yuan or some new commodity-backed currency. Global trade would become a nightmare. Exchange rates would swing wildly. Mistrust would paralyze the system, making everything you buy from overseas more expensive and harder to get. The second scenario is a return to hard assets. In a world where no one trusts anyone else's paper promises, nations may revert to the one form of money that has survived for 5,000 years. Gold. Gold may not be used to buy a cup of coffee, but it could become the only asset central banks will accept from each other to settle major international transactions. It would be a new, informal gold standard born out of necessity. And the third scenario is the most dystopian. Governments will use this catastrophic crisis that they created as the perfect excuse to roll out their ultimate tool of control, a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, a digital dollar. They will sell it to the public as a safe, modern, and efficient solution to the chaos. But it is a trap. A digital dollar is programmable money that would give the government the power to track every single transaction you make. They would have the ability to approve or deny your purchases, to automatically deduct taxes from your account, and even to put an expiration date on your money to force you to spend it. It is the end of financial freedom. As the crisis deepens and people desperately try to escape the dying dollar, the government will not admit failure. It will do what every failing government in history has done. It will turn on its own citizens. When people try to move their money to safety, they will find that the exits have been locked. They will lock down. They will confiscate. They will control. First, they will impose capital controls, making it a criminal act to move your money to another country or into a foreign currency. Your wealth will be trapped inside a burning building. Next, they will force financial institutions to buy government debt. Your 401k and your retirement funds will be forcibly converted into worthless government IOUs, all under the guise of national economic security. And if things get bad enough, they will do the unthinkable. They will make it illegal for you to own the one thing that could protect you: physical gold. If you think this can't happen in America, you need to open a history book. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt did exactly that, forcing Americans to turn in their gold to the federal government under penalty of prison. The precedent has been set, and through it all, they will stand on television and tell you with a straight face that these measures are temporary, that they are necessary, and that it is all being done for your own good, for the sake of stability, and for the security of the nation. But it will all be a lie. It will be the final act of a dying empire, buying itself a little more time as the ship sinks. That is the picture of the future we are facing. It is a bleak and frightening scenario, but panic is not a strategy. Despair is a luxury we cannot afford. The most important question is, what do you do now? Where is the escape hatch? Before we continue, I want you to join the conversation. Based on everything you've just heard, what asset do you believe is the safest harbor in this storm? Gold, real estate, Bitcoin, something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a community of people who are thinking ahead. Now, while I cannot give financial advice, I can share 5 fundamental principles, a philosophical shift, that have helped people survive every currency collapse in history. First, you must destroy your normality bias. This is the single most dangerous belief you can hold. It's the little voice in your head that says, things have always been this way, so they will continue to be this way. It's the belief that the government will fix it, that it can't happen here, that everything will eventually go back to normal. That belief is poison. The system is terminal. The math no longer works. You must accept that the world has already changed. Second, diversify out of purely dollar-denominated paper assets. Don't keep all of your eggs in the same paper basket that is actively catching on fire. Throughout history, people have protected their wealth by holding tangible things, real estate, productive farmland, precious metals like gold and silver, assets that have real intrinsic value, regardless of what a government promises a piece of paper is worth. Third, reduce your debt. In times of chaos, debt is a noose around your neck. While it's true that hyperinflation can wipe out debt, you have to survive the chaotic period in between to see that benefit. If you lose your job or if credit freezes up, that debt becomes an anchor that will pull you under. The safest position is to be as lean and flexible as possible. Fourth, build your community. When the official systems fail, we only have each other. Your network of neighbors, family, and trusted friends will become more valuable than any bank account. Your skills and your reputation will be your most important assets. In a crisis, the true currency is trust. And fifth, educate yourself. Everything I have told you in this video is public information. The history of the petrodollar, the patterns of reserve currencies, the de-dollarization trend, it's all there for anyone willing to look. Knowledge is the one form of wealth that no one can ever take away from you. The script for this collapse has already been written. It was written in the history of Rome, in the history of Spain, in the history of Great Britain, and in the history of every other empire that believed its power was absolute and that the party would never end. Every empire ends. Every paper currency in history has returned to its intrinsic value. Zero. The United States dollar is not special. It is not exempt. It is just next in line. The question was never if this was going to happen. The question was always when. And all the data, all the history, and all the actions of the smartest money on earth are screaming that the answer is now. The foundation has cracked. The empire is unraveling. And everything built on that foundation is about to come down with it. If this video opened your eyes to the picture the media is hiding, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because in the next video, we will dive deep into 3 specific strategies for building a storm-proof portfolio for this new era of chaos. You are not going to want to miss it.